The summons gave Catherine 3 weeks before they'd hang her innocent father for treason. Every door slammed shut except one. Duke Joseph Bentley, the Iron Duke, could save him. But the price he demanded she strip in his study to prove her virtue. What happened next shocked them both, because when he saw the bruises covering her body, the most dangerous man in England lost all control.
Hello everyone! Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video and share with loved ones, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin.
Dawn broke over London with the arrival of the execution summons. Katherine Sorensen held the heavy parchment sealed with black wax, her hands trembling as she read the words that sentenced her father to death in 3 weeks. Nicholas Sorensen would hang in the Tower courtyard for treason he didn't commit. At 24, Katherine was educated beyond her station, fluent in 3 languages, brilliant with numbers, and utterly penniless. Her father's arrest had seized everything: their home, assets, even her mother's jewelry. She'd exhausted every avenue, petitioned courts, begged audience with nobles, attempted to reach the king himself. Every door slammed shut. Every official turned away. The memory haunted her. Nicholas investigating treasury embezzlement, uncovering a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. Lord Reginald Hartwick's threats escalating from words to violence. The night Hartwick's men came to their home, held her down while her father was forced to watch, promising worse if he didn't stop. Nicholas had refused to abandon his investigation. Days later, he was arrested with forged documents bearing his signature found in a traitor's possession. Innocence didn't matter when evidence existed, fabricated or not. Someone whispered a final desperate option: Duke Joseph Bentley, the Iron Duke, master of the king's justice, the only man in England with authority to grant a stay of execution and order a retrial. But the rumors were whispered in fearful tones: never go alone to Bentley Hall. The Duke examined every woman who sought his favor, demanded proof of virtue, degrading tests that left some in tears and others never speaking of what happened. If you survived his assessment and he deemed you worthy, he moved heaven and earth to grant your request. Katherine stared at the directions to Bentley Hall clutched in her other hand. She had no choice. Meanwhile, at Bentley Hall, Duke Joseph Bentley sat in his study reviewing execution warrants with clinical detachment. At 35, he was cold, calculating, merciless in his judgments. Silver touched his temples prematurely, making him look older, harder. His reputation was deliberately cultivated, the Iron Duke who bent for no one. Solitary by choice, 15 years building emotional walls after a betrayal that taught him women were schemers, manipulators who wore masks until they got what they wanted. His examinations were power plays, proving he controlled desperate women before considering their pleas, making them pay a price for daring to ask him for anything. He received Catherine's petition letter that morning, noting her desperation in the handwriting, the ink blots where tears had fallen. He scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. Another scheming woman, he thought, trying to manipulate him through tears and pleas. She'd learned quickly that the Iron Duke gave nothing without exacting his price first. Both headed toward collision. Katherine prepared to sacrifice her dignity for her father's life. Joseph expecting another predictable supplicant to dominate and dismiss. Neither knew this encounter would shatter everything they thought they understood about power, control, and the difference between strength and cruelty. Katherine reached Bentley Hall as afternoon shadows lengthened. The estate loomed fortress-like, designed to intimidate. Every stone seemed to whisper warnings about the man inside. A butler led her to the study without a word. Duke Joseph Bentley stood by the fireplace, tall, imposing, ice-blue eyes that assessed her like a predator evaluating prey. Silver touched his temples, making him look dangerous rather than distinguished. Katherine dropped into a curtsy, forcing steadiness into her voice. Your Grace, thank you for seeing me. Miss Sorensen, you have 15 minutes to convince me your father deserves my intervention. She pleaded with desperate eloquence. Nicholas's innocence, the investigation into treasury corruption, Hartwick's obvious framing. Every word precise, passionate, true. Joseph listened with cold detachment. When she finished, he circled his desk slowly. Your father's case requires evidence of conspiracy, not your tears. But first, I need assurance you're not part of this plot. Catherine's breath caught. I don't understand. Remove your dress. His voice was clinical, emotionless. I need to verify you carry no hidden documents or weapons. Standard procedure for those seeking my favor. The room tilted. Catherine understood now. This was the examination everyone whispered about. The price of asking the Iron Duke for help. She thought of her father's face. The noose waiting. 3 weeks. Her hands trembled as she reached for her dress lacings. Shame burned through her, but she slowly unlaced the gown, letting it pull at her feet. She stood in her chemise and corset, arms wrapped around herself, refusing to let him see her break. Joseph circled her like a buyer evaluating livestock. Clinical, detached, proving his absolute control. Then he stopped suddenly behind her, a sharp intake of breath. Who did this? His voice had changed, from cold to dangerously low, barely controlled rage underneath. Catherine's exposed shoulders and back showed the evidence she'd tried to hide. Fading bruises in yellow, green, and dark purple. Systematic violence mapped across her skin. She lifted her chin defiantly, still refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her crumb on Hartwick's men. 3 visits, each worse than the last. They tried forcing father to stop investigating. When he refused, her voice caught, they made him watch. Joseph stood frozen, staring at the proof of torture inflicted on this woman who'd stood before him with such dignity. He'd expected a schemer, a manipulator, another woman wearing a mask to get what she wanted. Instead, he saw a victim who'd endured violence rather than compromise her father's integrity. His control fractured. He grabbed his coat from the chair, crossed to her in 2 strides, and draped it over her shoulders. Get dressed. This examination is over. Catherine looked up at him, confused by the sudden shift. For the first time in 15 years, the Iron Duke's armor cracked. He didn't see a supplicant to dominate. He saw someone who'd survived what should have broken her, and somehow remained unbroken. Joseph poured brandy into 2 glasses, a shocking breach of protocol, offering alcohol to an unmarried woman in his private study. He handed one to Catherine without a word. She took it with trembling hands, still wrapped in his coat, her dress hastily relaced. Tell me everything about Hartwick. Your father's investigation? Leave nothing out. For an hour, Catherine spoke. Nicholas had uncovered systematic treasury embezzlement, hundreds of thousands of pounds disappearing through falsified contracts and ghost employees. He was compiling evidence, preparing to present it to Parliament. Then suddenly he was arrested. Documents bearing his signature were found in a traitor's possession, letters discussing plans to overthrow the crown. All forgeries, but convincing ones. Joseph listened, his analytical mind processing every detail. When she finished, his response was brutally honest. I can't simply pardon him. Forged or not, those documents exist. A jury convicted him. It requires the king himself to overturn the verdict, and he won't do it without irrefutable proof of the real conspiracy. Catherine's hope died in her chest. Then there's nothing. I didn't say that, Joseph leaned forward. Stay here as my ward. Help me investigate. If we uncover the conspiracy and prove the framing, I'll take it directly to the king. She stared at him, not daring to believe. His expression was serious, almost gentle. But understand, this will be dangerous. Whoever framed Nicholas has resources and kills without hesitation. If you stay, you become a target. They'll come for you. Catherine didn't hesitate. When do we start? The faintest hint of a smile touched Joseph's lips. Now, though. He established Catherine in guest chambers that evening. Scandalous for an unmarried woman to stay under a bachelor duke's roof, but necessary. Staff immediately began gossiping, whispering behind hands about propriety and reputations. Catherine lay awake that night, torn between conflicting emotions. gratitude for this unexpected chance, lingering humiliation from the examination, the way he'd looked at her like property to be assessed, but also something else, the memory of how quickly his coldness had shattered when he saw her bruises, the protective way he'd draped his coat over her shoulders. In his own chambers, Joseph couldn't sleep either. He'd built his reputation on control, on dominating desperate supplicants. But Katherine Sorensen had walked into his study and shattered every assumption. She wasn't manipulating him. She was fighting with everything she had to save someone she loved. And for the first time in 15 years, he'd felt something other than cold satisfaction when dealing with a woman seeking his help. He'd felt shame for what he'd demanded of her. They began reviewing Nicholas's case files that night in the study, sitting across from each other at the desk. A partnership forming where there should have been only power and submission. This is just the beginning of how Katherine Sorensen transformed the Iron Duke, and what she discovered will shock you. Subscribe now because the investigation they're about to undertake will expose corruption at the highest levels, and the danger coming for them both will test everything they think they know about trust and survival. 2 weeks passed in intense investigation. They worked side by side daily, reviewing documents, interviewing Hartwick's former servants, following money trails through labyrinthine accounting records. Joseph had expected a helpless damsel needing his guidance. Instead, Katherine proved extraordinary. She noticed patterns in the ledgers he'd missed, recognized a clerk's handwriting from parliamentary records, decoded a substitution cipher in minutes that would have taken him hours. She was his intellectual equal, perhaps even his superior in certain areas. Late one night in the study, hunched over ledgers by candlelight, Katherine solved the key piece. Payments to H Industries matched deposits to... Her face went pale. She stopped mid-sentence. Joseph leaned over her shoulder, close enough to smell lavender in her hair. "What? Tell me." "Prince Leopold." Her voice was barely a whisper. "The king's cousin. He's behind everything." The magnitude crashed over both of them. Exposing a member of the royal family could destabilize the crown itself. This wasn't simple corruption. It was treason at the highest level. Katherine insisted immediately, "We tell the king." Joseph resisted, his political instincts screaming warnings. He won't believe without absolute proof. If Leopold learns we're investigating, we're both dead by morning. Then we get absolute proof. Joseph stared at her. This woman who'd walked into his study 3 weeks ago, terrified but defiant, who'd endured his cruelty and still fought with everything she had. "You're remarkable." Katherine deflected, uncomfortable with the admiration in his voice. "I'm desperate." Joseph corrected her, his hand moving involuntarily to her face. "No, you're brilliant, fearless. I've never met anyone like you." The air between them shifted, charged with something neither could name. Moments of accidental touch had become frequent, hands brushing over documents, shoulders pressed together, reviewing evidence, lingering eye contact that lasted too long. Katherine catching Joseph staring at her across the desk, his expression unguarded before he quickly looked away. The servants noticed the change, whispered that His Grace smiled now, laughed occasionally. Things they hadn't seen in 15 years. One afternoon, Katherine challenged his interpretation of a legal document. They argued passionately, both standing, voices raised but not angry, excited by the intellectual sparring. "You're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm listening perfectly. You're just wrong." Katherine laughed, surprised by her own boldness. The Iron Duke admitting he might be wrong? Mark the date. Joseph caught her hand without thinking. "Katherine," the study door opened. A servant entered with tea, breaking the moment. They stepped apart quickly, both flushed, both acutely aware they'd been seconds from crossing a line neither could uncross. That night, lying in separate chambers, both replayed that almost moment, the way his hand had felt holding hers, the intensity in his eyes, the terrifying realization that this partnership was becoming something far more dangerous than investigating corruption. They were falling for each other, and neither knew how to stop it. During a private dinner in the small dining room, Joseph asked about the bruises. They'd faded now, barely visible, But the memory remained. Catherine set down her wine glass, steadying herself. She revealed the complete story. Hartwick's men came 3 times, escalating violence with each visit. The first time, threats and minor injuries. The second, broken ribs and worse threats. The third time, they assaulted her while Nicholas was forced to watch, held down by 2 men, unable to help his daughter. They promised if the investigation continued, next time would be fatal. Father still refused to stop. Catherine's voice broke slightly. That's when they framed him. They knew he'd sacrifice himself before letting them hurt me again. Joseph's hands clenched around his fork, barely contained rage. He understood now the depth of Hartwick's evil, the calculated cruelty of targeting a daughter to break a father. Catherine turned the question back. Why are you unmarried? Why the cruel examinations? Joseph was silent for a long moment. Then the story emerged. 15 years ago, engaged to Lady Margaret Thornton. She'd seemed perfect, beautiful, intelligent, devoted. He'd believed himself in love. Wedding day morning, Margaret confessed in his study, I never loved you, Joseph. I needed your name and money. You're too cold to ever truly love anyway. This marriage would have been a prison for both of us. She'd fabricated her entire persona to access his wealth and title. Every smile, every tender word, calculated manipulation. He'd called off the wedding hours before the ceremony, built walls around his heart, decided to control women before they could manipulate him. Every woman who's come to me since has wanted something. His voice was hollow. I made sure they paid a price for asking. Proved I had power over them before considering their requests. Catherine listened, finally understanding the wounded man beneath the Iron Duke's armor. Catherine, Joseph's voice broke. What I did to you that first day, the examination, the humiliation, I'm ashamed. You weren't scheming. You were desperate and brave, and I used my power to degrade you. You gave me my father's only chance. Catherine's response was quiet. I'd endure it again if necessary. You shouldn't have to. No one should. I'm sorry. First genuine emotional vulnerability from the Iron Duke in 15 years. Catherine saw him fully now, not a monster, but a wounded man who'd armored himself in cruelty to avoid being hurt again. Someone who'd confused control with safety. Joseph saw her fully too, not a supplicant to dominate, but an equal who'd chosen courage over safety, who'd endured violence rather than compromise integrity. The attraction deepening into something profound, something terrifying. That night, both lay awake in separate rooms, Catherine in the guest chamber, Joseph in his own, both thinking of the other, both recognizing they'd crossed from partnership into something dangerous, both wondering if love could grow from such broken beginnings, neither knowing that tomorrow would bring violence that would force them to confront everything they felt. The investigation continued, but with new intimacy threading through their work. They laughed over shared observations, finished each other's thoughts, communicated with glances across the study. Joseph taught Catherine to ride one afternoon. She'd never learned. Her family too poor for horses. He was patient, gentle, his hand steadying her in the saddle, voice encouraging rather than commanding. You're doing beautifully. Don't be afraid. I'm not afraid when you're here. The words hung between them, meaning more than horse riding. Evenings, Catherine played pianoforte after dinner. Joseph listened from his chair, visibly moved by the music, by her grace. The servants whispered, His Grace smiles now. Haven't seen that in 15 years. One afternoon, rain forced them inside during a garden walk. They ran laughing toward the conservatory, both soaked through. Joseph wrapped a blanket around Catherine's shoulders, and suddenly they were inches apart. His hand lingered at her neck. Her breath caught. The moment stretched, charged with everything unspoken. Joseph leaned closer, Catherine's eyes closed, waiting. He pulled away abruptly. We shouldn't. You're under my protection. I won't take advantage. Catherine's frustration flared. Stop protecting me from yourself. I'm not Margaret. I'm not here to manipulate you. I know. His voice was strained. That's what terrifies me. The evidence mounted steadily. Ledgers showing Leopold's embezzlement, witness statements, forged signature analysis. They were close to having everything needed. 1 week remained until Nicholas's execution. The plan formed, present everything to the king, but they still needed the direct link between Leopold and the frame-up. One crucial piece missing. Joseph hosted a small dinner for Catherine, chaperone present to maintain some propriety. Midway through, he presented a velvet box. "These belonged to my mother. I'd like you to have them." Catherine opened it, a strand of perfect pearls. Her own had been seized with everything else when Nicholas was arrested. "Joseph, I can't." "Please," his voice was soft. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What?" "Hope that not everyone is deceiving me, that genuine connection exists, that I'm capable of trusting again." Their hands touched across the table. Neither pulled away. The chaperone looked away discreetly, pretending not to notice. The moment shattered when a footman entered with a letter. Anonymous. Threatening. "Stop investigating or the girl dies too. Her father's fate is sealed. Don't make it worse." Joseph's protective instincts exploded. "You're leaving tonight. I'll send you somewhere safe while I finish this." Catherine refused. "We're close." "That's why they're threatening us. I won't run. I won't risk you. It's not your choice. This is my father's life." Their first real argument, both passionate, voices raised, neither backing down. The unspoken truth crackling between them. They were arguing because they cared deeply for each other, because the thought of loss was unbearable. What happens next will leave you breathless, because the danger they've been investigating is about to come crashing through their door in the most violent way possible. Subscribe now to see how the Iron Duke responds when the woman he loves is threatened, and whether their investigation will save Catherine's father or destroy them both. 2 days after the threat, Catherine worked alone in the library, researching property records that might link Leopold to the forged documents. She didn't hear the assassin enter. A hand clamped over her mouth. Cold steel pressed against her throat. "Hartwick sends his regards." Catherine bit down hard on his palm. He cursed, and she screamed. Joseph crashed through the library door with lethal violence. He moved faster than Catherine had ever seen, disarming the assassin with brutal efficiency. His fist connected with the man's jaw once, twice, 3 times. Blood splattered across leather-bound books. He dragged the assassin to the window, dangling him out by his collar. "Tell Leopold if he comes near her again, I'll expose everything publicly and damn the consequences." He threw the man back inside, unconscious. Joseph turned to Catherine, trembling against the bookshelf, checking her frantically for wounds. His hands shook as they moved over her arms, her shoulders, her face. "I could have lost you." His voice broke completely. He cupped her face in both hands and kissed her. Desperate, uncontrolled, terrified. The man who'd prided himself on iron control for 15 years completely undone by fear of losing her, Catherine kissed him back just as desperately, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Joseph's expression shifted to horror. "This was a mistake. I shouldn't have—" "Don't!" Catherine's voice was fierce. "Don't you dare pretend you didn't mean it." Joseph retreated into formality, walls slamming back into place. "We must present the evidence carefully, through proper channels. The king's advisors first, then a formal petition." Catherine realized with dawning clarity he was afraid, not of Leopold, but of choosing justice over political stability, of risking everything, including the crown's favor. "You're backing down." "I'm being strategic." "You're being a coward." Her voice cracked. "My father has 4 days left." That night, unable to sleep, Catherine made her decision. She slipped into Joseph's study and gathered all their evidence. Every ledger, every witness statement, every piece of proof they'd compiled. Before dawn, she hired a coach to Windsor Castle. She bribed guards with the last of her mother's jewelry hidden in her hem, fought her way toward the king's private chambers. They arrested her trying to force entry, dragging her back as she screamed for the king to listen. King George himself investigated the commotion, found Catherine on her knees, documents scattered around her. Your Majesty, I am Katherine Sorensen. My father hangs in 4 days for treason he didn't commit. I have proof the real traitor is Prince Leopold. She spread the evidence across the floor with shaking hands. Joseph arrived moments later, having ridden through the night after discovering her absence. He stood frozen in the doorway, watching Catherine risk everything while he'd hesitated. The king read in silence, his expression darkening with each document. Finally, Bentley, I assume you knew about this? Joseph looked at Catherine, defiant, terrified, magnificent. In that moment, he made his choice. Yes, Your Majesty. She's told you the truth, every word. The king's silence was deafening. Then, arrest Prince Leopold. Grant Nicholas Sorensen full pardon immediately. He looked at Catherine. And someone get this brave young woman a chair before she collapses. Catherine and Joseph were detained at Windsor Castle under protective custody while the king handled Leopold's arrest quietly, exiled to avoid public scandal that could destabilize the crown. Separate chambers, but under guard for protection. Catherine paced her room, terrified the pardon wouldn't reach the tower in time. 4 days had become hours. The execution was scheduled for dawn. Morning light broke through her window. Catherine stood frozen, unable to breathe, imagining her father on the scaffold. Joseph appeared at her door. It's done, your father is free. The king's men reached the tower an hour ago. Catherine's knees buckled. Joseph caught her, holding her as she collapsed with relief, sobs racking her body. He sank to the floor with her, cradling her against his chest. You did it, he whispered into her hair. You saved him. When she could finally speak, Catherine pulled back to look at him. You forced my hand. You knew I was too cautious to act quickly enough. She started to apologize, but Joseph stopped her. Don't. You did what I should have done days ago. You risked everything for justice while I calculated political consequences. His thumb traced her cheek. Catherine, I've spent 15 years building walls, controlling every situation, never allowing anyone close. Then you appeared in my study, terrified but defiant, and every wall came crashing down. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I love you. I don't deserve you after what I put you through, but I love you desperately. Catherine searched his face. You love me? From the moment I saw those bruises and realized you'd endured violence rather than compromise your father's integrity. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Catherine's response was a challenge, but then prove it. How? Marry me, not from guilt, not to protect me. Marry me as an equal partner, someone you trust to make decisions, not just control. Joseph dropped to one knee right there on the Windsor Castle floor. Katherine Sorensen, will you marry me? Not as my ward or possession, but as my wife, my partner, my equal. Will you teach me how to trust instead of control, how to love instead of command? Catherine pulled him up, kissed him, not desperate like before, but certain. Yes, but I have conditions. Joseph laughed genuinely for the first time she'd heard. Of course you do. Father lives with us. I continue investigating corruption alongside you, and you never, her voice hardened. Sherlock another door when a woman is in the room. No more examinations. No more using power to humiliate. Joseph sobered completely. Agreed, all of it. Catherine, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that first day. I don't need you to make up for it. She took his hand. I need you to be better going forward. Can you do that? With you beside me? Yes, I can. They stood together in the Windsor hallway, two people who'd started in the worst possible way, choosing to build something real from broken beginnings. 3 months later, Catherine married Joseph in a ceremony that shocked London society. A woman of no status wedding the Iron Duke, scandalous, unprecedented, perfect. Nicholas Sorensen walked his daughter down the aisle, free, cleared of all charges, vindicated. Hartwick had been hanged for conspiracy. Leopold exiled permanently. Justice finally had been served. The king elevated Joseph to Chancellor of the Exchequer, with authority to root out crown fraud at every level. The Iron Duke's reputation transformed from merciless judge to incorruptible reformer. At the wedding breakfast, Joseph stood to toast his bride. I was known as the Iron Duke, cold, controlling, unmoved by emotion. Then Katherine Sorensen stood in my study, vulnerable yet unbroken, and taught me the difference between power and strength. His voice carried across the silent room. Power is forcing submission. Strength is choosing trust when you're terrified. She's the strongest person I know, and I'm honored she chose me despite everything. Katherine rose, her response equally powerful. I learned that sometimes the most dangerous person becomes the safest place. Joseph demanded everything from me that first day. Now he gives me everything. His trust, his partnership, his heart. She looked directly at him. That's how you change an Iron Duke, not by breaking him, but by showing him their strength in yielding to love. Katherine didn't become a decorative duchess tucked away in drawing rooms. She became Joseph's true partner in reforming England's justice system. Her insights led to new protections for the falsely accused, transparency requirements in crown finances, investigations into corruption at the highest levels. Over the next decade, they investigated 47 cases together, exposing fraud that had festered for generations. Catherine Bentley became the first woman to officially advise the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Their marriage produced 3 children and lasted 42 years. Years later, an elderly Catherine and Joseph sat in their study reviewing case files, silver-haired but still sharp. A young woman arrived seeking help for her falsely accused brother. Joseph started to stand, but Catherine stopped him with a gentle hand on his arm. She received the woman warmly, no barriers between them. Tell me everything, and you need not fear. There will be no examinations here, only justice. The woman left with hope, tears of relief rather than shame. Joseph took Catherine's hand across the desk. You've changed everything, the system, the crown, the way we deliver justice. Me. Catherine smiled, squeezing his fingers. We changed each other. That was always the point. Final image, their joined hands, wedding rings catching afternoon light, surrounded by case files of innocence they'd saved together. 2 people who'd met in the worst possible way, who'd begun with humiliation and coercion, but chose to transform it into partnership, equality, and enduring love. This is what real transformation looks like. Not perfect people, but broken ones who chose to heal together. If stories of courage, redemption, and love built from impossible beginnings move you, subscribe now. Because history is full of untold stories about people who refused to accept the world as it was and fought to make it better. One brave choice at a time.
If you enjoyed this story, we appreciate you a whole lot and look forward to connecting with you as we build a community on this channel. Every day, we will put out more stories, so we need your support. Help us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. You won't miss any new exciting videos. Check out the next video. You'll love it!